Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics like wealth creation strategies, investment principles, creating passive income, paying off your debt faster, and much, much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host.
Hi, Patrick.
Hey Pat, how's it going?
Good. Travelling well.
Good. Got something a little bit different today.
Yep.
Run us in, Pat. What are we talking to the viewers and the listeners about today?
Yeah, so we're talking about things I wish I knew when I was in my 20s, 30s, I guess.
Things I wish I knew when I was younger.
Yeah.
I'm still in my 30s, Pat. What are you talking about?
Well, technically so am I, but anyway.
And I always will be.
Yep, that's it. Forever in the sub-40s category.
Kind of feel like a wise old person sort of sharing the wisdom on the younger generation.
Well, yeah, you learn to make mistakes as you go along, so hopefully you're not making the same mistakes, I'm assuming.
That's it. So I guess the theory behind this is probably a few things just in our experience, how it kind of ties into, I guess, what we do as a living in terms of wealth creation, money management, financial advice. But some of these things that we're going to talk about are really, I think, really good things in terms of life lessons that can apply to sort of all aspects of your life.
100%.
Pat, let's rip into it. What's the first one off the rank?
So I guess the first one for me was just learn about finances and health. And the two are kind of quite correlated in a lot of ways. Finance is just basic money management, get a budget, don't spend too much, that kind of stuff. But I guess the health side of things as well, it forms part of, I guess, money management in a way. If you get your health right, you're never going to have to worry about, looking after or spending a bunch of money on correcting a bunch of bad habits later down the track, right? So, if you're talking about just general food, you're talking about kind of nutrition, you're talking about, exercise and mental sharpness and other things as well. There's a bunch that just sits within that. And part of, I guess, learning about your own health, your own body, means that later down the track, you're not, like I said, not having to spend a bunch of money correcting things, bad posture, like for me recently, or just bad habits in terms of food and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's probably a couple of things in that for me. The health one is quite interesting because as you get older, more things tend to go wrong and more creaks and cracks and things like that. And healthcare is quite expensive.
Yeah.
We've got a pretty good system in Australia, but to stay healthy, you need to spend some money. So you want to try and minimise that or prolong that as best as you can.
Yeah.
So definitely the health one from my perspective, and with finance, just even the simple things. And a few people might have heard me talk about this before, but basic money management principles aren't necessarily taught in school. We'll talk a little bit about personal money management, but I'm just talking about the fundamentals, I think, at least initially, in terms of, even things like money versus money earned versus borrowed money, like credit cards and loans and things like that, just something simple from that perspective. But I think those two definitely resonate, and I like those two to start off with.
And I guess one other thing as well, and this is probably slightly different off topic a little bit, but you've got kids, right? I'm planning to have kids eventually at some stage anyway, but there's one thing that I kind of always go back to, and it's like, did your parents over the dinner table talk about finances, right? And I find that's a really strong correlation to how successful you are with your own personal finances. Because your parents didn't talk about it, you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So you basically are making mistakes that they probably made when they were younger, and you might be following down the same rabbit hole that they went down in terms of just bad money management habits as well, right? And so making sure that your kids are informed and at least educate them somewhat in terms of your own mistakes means that they avoid those pitfalls later down the track.
Yeah, really easy and simple way to do it if you've got children, I think, and just talk about it, be open with it, for sure.
100%.
Pat, things that interest you. I think that's always a good thing to be able to pursue those sorts of things.
Yep.
How does that sort of correlate into what we're talking about?
Yeah, so I guess, when I was young, you kind of follow what other people do, and you kind of then eventually go, I don't want to do this. So for us, or for me certainly, it's a case of do things that you're interested in, just generally speaking, because you might then find yourself in a position where you're the expert in that field, whether it's a hobby or just something that you enjoy doing, and it gives you a sense of satisfaction with it as well.
Yep.
I think that's it's a well-rounded individual as opposed to someone like me probably drank too much when I was in my early 20s and stuff like that, and really wasn't quite as well-rounded in a lot of ways. But yeah, I guess having just some personal interests as well, like go do something that interests you and makes you happy, essentially.
I think we all suffered from that, Pat. I think it's just a symptom of being young and hanging out with your mates and basically going with the crowd, and whatever the crowd decides, that's what you tend to do. But definitely that can help you sort of later in life from a career development perspective as well too. And that's essentially how I got into financial advice. Is I enjoyed it. I was doing it as a hobby on the side, just studying financial advice. So that's probably a bit of an extension of that led into a career for me. But yeah, I can't agree more. The one that sort of sticks with me, which is the next one that I wanted to talk about, I alluded to it before in a simple perspective, but and this is probably when you're a little bit older and a bit more mature, so maybe you're in your early 20s or what have you, is really learning about personal money management. That was the thing that really, I guess, changed the dial for me in terms of sort of my approach and my thinking towards money and my money habits, and sort of that led into investing and saving and different things like that. So definitely getting an understanding of how personal money management works, what works well, what doesn't. And then the light bulb moment for me was really, if you get that right, what then becomes possible? Because that's the exciting stuff, which is basically, getting a surplus, taking that surplus, and then what can you do with it? So learning the basics of investing, and, you kind of go from there.
And you and I have kind of shared our own, money management habits and tips and tricks and stuff like that along the way as well. And, I think we kind of, funnily enough, ended up on a fairly similar way of approaching money management. My situation was a little bit simpler, like it was just myself and my own finances, but obviously you with your family and things like that. So slightly different, but in a way fundamentally the same. Funnily enough, we ended up on a fairly similar kind of basis as well, which is funny. Because
if you get that right, and that then leads into probably the next thing, I think, is that surplus then goes into investing. And the world of investing is extremely complicated, and you can go down a rabbit hole and go literally as deep as you want and keep going and keep going and keep going. But from a really basic and fundamental perspective, just the concept and the understanding of compounding interest. Like, it's so simple, it's so easy to understand, yet it's, I don't know, just one of those things that I wish I had learnt about earlier.
Eighth wonder of the world.
I think Warren Buffett says that, doesn't he? So, Andrew, if you're listening, that's the Warren Buffett quote for you. I know that you're probably missing that when you're on the Greek island somewhere. So, there you go. There's the great man Warren Buffett for you.
It's definitely and it's one of those things where you learn about it, you understand it, and you basically can leverage off it, and the world's your oyster thereafter, right? Like, it's such a powerful tool. Like, and time is. And I always talk about this with clients. It's like your two biggest assets is your ability to generate an income and the time that you have to invest. Right? Whether it's a year or 2 or 5 years or 30 years, that time to invest and allowing that money just to do its thing, compound out, naturally just run its course, and you're basically laughing by the time you're done and dusted. Right?
And I guess the other interesting thing, the other thing that I wish I learnt on the compounding interest and how that earns interest on top of interest, it's boring. Right? So it's almost a lesson in understanding compounding interest and then learning to be patient and basically not touching stuff. Because like I was saying before, like, investing could be really complex, and there's all these shiny bells and whistles and fantastic things that you can do. And you can get lost in that, and it can take you away from your investment strategy, where tried, tested, boring, compound time frame, kind of leave it alone, and you'll probably get to the same place, if not better, with a hell of a lot less heartache and probably more of your own time back. I call it the non-sexy way of investing, and it's exactly that. It's completely boring, but it's predictable, and it works.
it absolutely works. So yeah, don't screw things up too much, but at the same time, just let it do its thing.
That's it.
That's it.
Investing in yourself?
Yeah. So once again, this kind of comes back to doing things that you're interested in to some extent, but invest in yourself, invest in your own knowledge as well, because that's a resource and a skill set that you can then compound out, right? So we talked about compound interest before, but you and yourself, you're a vessel for knowledge, essentially. Like I kind of always talk about being a lifelong learner, understanding things, digesting things, and then kind of going, okay, how do I then apply that to my own life to make it better, right? And so investing in time, resources, money sometimes into your own knowledge and your knowledge base means that over time compounding that out means that you're setting yourself up for success as well.
Yeah, yep. And I think translating that back to a monetary perspective, there's probably a few things that spring to mind and resonate with me on this. The first is that if you're investing in yourself, specifically where it translates to your skill set in your craft, you'd like to think that your skill set is increasing, so your worth to your employer, to your market, to your clients has increased. So your earning capacity definitely goes up. And we'll talk about travel later on, and this kind of then goes back to the things that interest you as well too. But in my mind, if I was making a hiring decision around two people that had almost identical skill sets, and the person that I was talking to had some interests, had invested in themselves, I'd resonate towards them more so because I feel like they're a more well-rounded person. So it doesn't necessarily need to translate back to your skill set with work, although that's where I was going with it. But I think that can also help you as well too, in a monetary sense, in a wealth creation perspective, because it can lead to, I think, increased earning capability.
And I guess, investing in yourself doesn't necessarily mean that it's formal education. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to expend a lot to do an MBA or whatever it is, although I think there's worth in that as well. It's more of a case of invest time and energy into stuff that you're, once again, interested in. And that kind of then it pays, the fruits of your labor essentially will kind of pay out in the long term.
Well said. Then one of the things that I think is also crucial, and it takes a lot to get this, especially, I think it takes a level of maturity. We were talking about this before off air, before we started rolling, but don't be afraid to give stuff a go and essentially make mistakes. Because you're going to cock stuff up, right? You're going to make a mistake. Don't be afraid. What's 100%. The worst that can happen?
100%. And I guess maybe, the schooling system kind of fails you in some ways because of this, because, when you go do an exam, do an assignment, all they do is there's a big X against the ones you failed on, in quotation marks. So they're the ones that probably condition you from a young age to obviously just get the right answer. And sometimes people don't know what the right answer is. And, you might be at the forefront of a new technology, a new service, a new whatever, and you're just testing the waters. You're just dipping your toe in, seeing, if it's actually okay, and then jumping in the deep end later down the track. But the idea is, and it's taken me a long time, and I'm still kind of grappling with it to some extent as well, but, it's okay to make mistakes. As long as you learn from those mistakes, that's probably the other thing, right? But make mistakes. Don't be afraid. There's a learning curve out of the back of that, and you kind of just do that a bunch of times, and you get to a point where you're close to, or very, or at perfection, really.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a cultural thing, or look, nobody likes making a mistake.
No.
But if you change your mindset around this, and I've tried to do this with some personal development and things like that, but if you recognise that the mistake-making process is part of progress, you change your mindset on it and you realise it's a natural part of it. That's how you get better at stuff. You're not going to be able to do something from day one and be great at it. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess things up. And I definitely think that that's okay. And the sooner you can learn that, the better off I think you are anyway. So really valid one. Pat, what do we got next on the list?
And once again, I'm guilty of this. This is my point here. But don't buy all the nice shiny things and toys and cars and whatever just to impress people, right? At the end of the day, they're living their own life and you're living your own life. So you're basically showing off to some extent, and they don't care. not necessarily. It's it comes back to knowing what your own worth is, and obviously being a more rounded individual. And sometimes you don't need all those shiny new clothes and toys and whatever. So having, I guess, commitment in yourself to know, hey, by the way, I'm a pretty awesome person as I currently stand now, and I don't need all these other things, bits and pieces, debt to get into debt to buy a new car, whatever it is, right? To be an awesome person. Like I am already that. And
I think that comes back to almost what you value as well too.
Yeah.
I'll give a perfect example of sort of my take on it. My family and I, we love traveling, so I'd rather go without the shiny materialistic stuff, and divert that money to a holiday.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the thing that we find value in, experiences, time together, as opposed to, buying the next shiniest thing because it looks good or it's expected from society or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Like, don't care about that. And it takes a bit of maturity in order to get to that position.
Yeah.
But I think it also ties into your value as well too.
Yeah.
And over time, and I think it gets a bit easier as you get older, that you realise that, hey, you're here for a good time, not a long time, and there's no point in doing that. And I guess there's an environmental slant on it as well too, in terms of consumerism and stuff. And that's something that we're really focused on in terms of our business, and sustainable investing as well too. And we're going through a carbon offset program as well at the moment. So there's a few different things on that. But that's a huge one.
Yeah, and I guess at the end of the day, once you buy it, that thing doesn't become new anymore, and then you're chasing the next new thing, right? So it's this perpetual kind of wheel that you're running on, and they call it the rat race, right? Like this is like the perfect example of it.
I don't know. Is that where the saying comes from? We might need to look that up. Maybe that's
sure. But anyway, it's something along with the wheel and the rat and
something. Yeah, kind of makes sense. But and an extension of that, but try and differentiate between the new shiny stuff is, and this ties back into consumerism as well. But one of the things that I found, and I'll give a couple of examples on this because there's two that I can think of, is when you do purchase stuff, you buy it once and you buy it right.
Yep.
So the example that I'm thinking of is, say something as simple as an umbrella, right? You go and buy an umbrella, and an umbrella is an umbrella, right? But you can buy an umbrella that's going to work and last, a good quality one that's going to last a long period of time, or you can buy the cheap $25 or $35 one that's probably going to do its job for a year, but as soon as you get a big gust of wind, it's gone. And I think you can kind of apply that across a range of things. The other area for me, and probably more so when when you've got some stuff to do around the house, is buying tools, right? So if you're going to buy tools, buy it once, get the good quality stuff. As tempting as it is to buy the cheap and nasty, because they don't last. No,
I've been guilty of rounding a few bolts using cheap, shitty tools like that.
That's it. So that's probably one from mine.
And I think if anyone's ever read Marie Kondo or that kind of minimalist lifestyle in a way nowadays, but you basically have things that spark joy or have things that are fit for purpose, but you don't have 10 of those things at any one time. Like why do you have 10 umbrellas? Because by the way, each one breaks and you don't want to throw it out, whatever it is, right? And it comes down to clothes and that kind of stuff as well. It's like you buy a good quality piece, timeless piece, you're never going to have to worry about replacing it. As long as you look after it, obviously, or you don't forget your umbrella at the shop or whatever it is. It's you'll never need to replace it, really.
Right. The other one that I've put on here is to learn how to sell. And what I mean by that, and this one is really an interesting one in my mind, it's not necessarily just in the traditional sense that you tend to think about it. Like you buy this, you work in a shop and you sell it. It could be you sell yourself. It could be, how do you present to other people? How do you go about the thought process that sits behind that? And it could be a conduit into, hey, what skills do I need to develop? And it kind of then ties into, I guess, a little personal development as well too. But what skills do I need in order to be able to do that? And the reason why I say that is because it's really big now, and there's probably a term for it that never used to exist in terms of side hustles and things like that, but it is a conduit into potentially earning more money.
Yeah.
Whether it is as a side hustle or whether it is as, for your employment or whatever you do for a living, if you can sell, I think you can really dial up your earning capability from that perspective. So that's from a work sense. Also applies in a personal setting as well too.
Yeah. And I guess the way that I interpret that point you made around selling yourself and your services, and your the way you present yourself and all that kind of stuff as well. But there's going back to schooling has a big kind of mark regarding IQ, right? So you test well, you all that kind of stuff, but there's no focus or very little focus on EQ, right? Emotional intelligence. And so the emotional intelligence piece, and certainly I find in my work, is it's equally, if not more so, important than the IQ stuff. The IQ stuff you can kind of pick up along the way, but the EQ stuff takes a long time to harness and really refine that, and be able to connect with someone, to be able to understand and sell them if you need to. Your services, right? So that's the other part of the equation, the EQ part of it, that I find is really quite important in terms of just being able to market yourself, being able to brand yourself, because everyone has their own brand, right? And effectively the EQ part of it is just, if not more so, important than the IQ part of it.
Yeah. And probably just the last point on that one, Pat, is when you sell anything, whether it's yourself, whether it's in the traditional selling capacity, there's rejection. And that's just a natural part of the process. Talking about, mistakes and not being afraid to make them and things, but the resilience that you learn by being rejected is probably one of the best life lessons that I've learned. So I think that then ties into the selling piece, and it gets you out of your comfort zone. You're not afraid. You break through that. I think that's a really big one, and can't understate that.
Absolutely. No, well said.
Pat, what do you reckon? What have you got left for us?
Last one, and I think this is important once again, just to be a well-rounded individual as well. And I guess I was quite fortunate. My mum loved to travel, so she kind of took us and the kids, her kids, along each time we went anywhere. So we travelled a lot when I was younger, and I still do try to travel at least once a year to a new place. Kind of every time, is just to travel, explore, do different things, explore new cultures, eat new foods, that kind of stuff, and really immerse yourself into the environment and your senses as well, right? So I think that's a really important part, and I think nowadays, probably the last couple of years we haven't had that ability to travel, and people are obviously traveling quite a bit now just to compensate. But traveling is such an important aspect, and being able to understand and gravitate towards someone because they understand you and the little nuances of your culture and other bits and pieces because they've traveled to your country or whatever it is. That's such an important thing.
Definitely a big eye opener, the travel piece, that's for sure. Especially if you get off the beaten track a little bit, and maybe you're not traveling to countries that are too familiar. Maybe a different speaking country, different religions, different culture, different cuisines. No, definitely resonate with that one.
Get some deli belly or bit of food poisoning or whatever it is as well. No, it's all part of the travel experience, right?
As long as it doesn't kill you, it probably makes for a good story.
Exactly.
So there you go. Pat, well, I think we've done a good job with that one, imparting our wise words.
Yep.
What do you think?
Hopefully someone's gotten at least some value out of our wisdom over time, right?
That's it. Maybe it's a conduit into the lifestyle podcast. Who knows? Maybe that's the spin-off.
360 lifestyle.
That's it. All good. Well, to our viewers and our listeners, thank you for listening today. And Pat, thanks for your time once again. And we will catch you on the next one.
All right. Thanks all.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we've talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
Just a reminder to our listeners that the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and it is not intended as personal recommendations for the audience. Please consider whether the information suits your circumstances before acting on it. This information is provided by Billy Amiridis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Pty Ltd, authorized representatives and credit representatives of AMP Financial Planning.